Heaven or hell, it's a terrifying topic, and not for the faint of heart, but there is a lot of good in this read. Particularly inspiration for evangelism. This sermon has been translated into Spanish using Google Translate in the attempts that someone may be blessed by its rough translation. The sermon was delivered by Gordon McCulloch to the Congregation of Holy Trinity in Ayrshire, Scotland, on the 29th of September 2019. Holy Trinity is a Scottish Episcopal Church in the dioceses of Glasgow and Dumfries. Amos 6, 1a, 4-7 Psalm 146 1 Timothy 6. 6-19 Luke 16. 19-31. Please join me in a brief prayer. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your eyes, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Psalm 19, 14, 1. Introduction. Our reading this morning is quite complex, and it is my interpretation of today's reading, and if you don't agree with me, that's fine, we will remain friends, but this gospel reading tomorrow is not for the faint of heart, because it is a subject we rarely want to dwell on, our destiny into the unknown, and our lives after we die. But we all have to face it at some point when we all ask the question, what happens to us after we die? And we all ask this question because we don't know, and the brutal fact is that we are all going to die. And what's worse, we don't know anyone who has come back from the dead to ask them what it's like, because no one we know has conquered 775. Death. Yet there is one man who did, the only man, who died and rose again over 2,000 years ago, and it is to him, and him alone, that we can ask that question. And since he is God, after all, I think it's worth listening to him. After all, he came from the other side in the first place, that is, from heaven he came. Helpless baby to this earth, and he lived among us, and when he died, he returned to heaven through a brief spell in hell. I think that qualifies him. And therefore he is our authority, without astronomers, without ghosts, without mediums, without oracles or clairvoyance, no one but him alone who rose from the dead, and it is his words that we will hear this morning. So in today's reading, we hear that Jesus taught us exactly that, but in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable, probably because he wants us to hear this message and prepare for death, to heaven or hell. In today's reading, Jesus removed the veil between this world and the next, and behind this veil we see a heaven and a hell. Many years ago, there was an epitaph on a tombstone that said, "Consider, young man, as you pass, how you are now, so once it was I. As I am now, you will soon be, so prepare yourself, young man, to follow me." That is quite poetic. It is very profound, however. Some wits inscribed a response on that tombstone that said, "Following me is not my intention, until I know which way they sent you." There's only one of two places we can go, and we're all here this morning because we've already decided which one we prefer. And since it is something we all must face at some point, I pray that today's passage gives you hope for the future, just as Jesus intended. 3. The parable. Now, some people call this a parable, but is it? It certainly reads differently from all the other parables I have read. To start, he gives two names of the characters, Lazarus and Abraham, suggesting that this is a true story. There is a rich man whom Jesus never named, possibly someone recognizable, and a beggar is called Lazarus. Now Lazarus and the rich man obviously knew each other, but they are both now dead and have gone to separate places in their deaths. I'm also sure they would have had different funerals, because I'm sure the rich man had a great funeral attended by many dignitaries declaring that he was a great man, and you know what I mean, while poor Lazarus received a pauper's tomb, if anything. In verse 23, Jesus said about the rich man, "And in hell he lifted up his eyes, tormented, and saw Abraham in the distance and Lazarus in his bosom." We'll stop there for a minute, too. The rich man